This week we will be looking at pictorialist photography. Our major concerns are, of course, what are the stylistic strategies that they're using, but also we're thinking about how they use the emerging gallery and art publication system to promote their work. Our learning goals will be first to discuss their photographic techniques, second, to analyze examples of pictorialist photography by the movement's major photographers, and then finally to understand the significance of private galleries and art publications for promoting this style. Pictorialist photographers argued that photography should be about beauty rather than fact. For these photographers, the optical sharpness and the documentary quality of photography is a problem. Instead, they want to emphasize the hand of the photographer, and they do this through the manipulation of photographic prints. They see this as being a form of self-expression. The subject matters they pursue are similar to paintings. They have images of rural life, landscape, and motherhood. The British photographer Peter Emerson was an early practitioner of pictorialist photography. In this image at the plow, the end of the furrow, you can see that the horses are clearly in focus, but everything in the background is intentionally blurred. He does this through manipulating the negative, kind of similar to the way that Julia Margaret Cameron did. But for Emerson, he argues that the way that we actually see is not the overall crispness of a photograph. Rather, it's only at the point of our focus where we have that crisp clarity. And so he argued that his photographs were actually more natural because of the way they replicated actual human observation. Here's another British photographer, George Davison. This is a landscape of a rural town with an onion field in the foreground. And again, you can see that it's very deliberately blurred. This is because of the way he's manipulating the negative. And for these photographers, they wanted it to be this manipulation to be visible. They really were very concerned with the viewer understanding that the artist had achieved this, that they weren't just removing the lens cap and taking what was in front. A lot of what was important about it was what was happening in the darkroom and the manipulations that they pursued there. In the United States, the most important pictorialist photographer is Alfred Stieglitz. He was born in 1864 in Hoboken, New Jersey, to a German Jewish family. He returns to Germany in 1881 and spends the next 10 years there building a reputation as an innovative photographer. When he comes back to the US in 1890, he sees himself as an ambassador of sorts for modern art in the United States. He really wants to bring avant-garde European artists to America so that the viewers in the United States can learn about modernity. And the way that he does this is very intentional. He establishes art journals and gallery spaces where he is bringing in what he sees as being very modern European art and trying to argue for that type of art in the United States. And initially, pictorialism is what he is interested in. So that's his biography, but I want to talk more about this particular photograph of him. This is a photogravure. It's by a pictorialist photographer named Gertrude Casebier. And you can see that all around the side of his head, do you see these like scratching things? This is where she actually scratches into a metal plate. So a photogravure is a photographic negative that's been transferred to a metal plate, and then the photographer etches onto the plate and makes prints from it that way. And so like you can quite literally see where she's marked the plate with her hands. So Stieglitz eventually breaks away from this group called the Camera Club and forms what he calls the Photo Secession. This is in 1902. And his goal is, quote, to compel the serious recognition of photography as an additional medium of pictorial expression, end quote. Now, this sounds familiar, right? This is what we've been talking about for like the last 50 years. However, it's new for it to be happening in the United States, and it's new for Stieglitz to be doing it through a gallery and then through a very specific art journal that he called Camera Work. So his gallery is called the Little Galleries of the Photo Secession, and it's at 291 Fifth Avenue in New York City. And then the journal he publishes is called Camera Work, and each issue focuses on a different photographer and reproduces some of their photographs in the journal. And so they become collector's items because the photographs that are reproduced in them are like high quality images. This is your discussion this week. You can see it's mostly just organizing stylistic analysis about different examples of pictorialist photography. So you should respond to one of these threads with analysis of what makes these examples of pictorialist photography. Your post should have specific stylistic analysis, and for your first post, we're really just looking to have a lot of different stylistic points to consider. Your written assignment this week is to use Stieglitz's Winter on Fifth Avenue as an example of pictorialist photography and use the image to explain both the stylistic and technical strategies that define pictorialism. An important thing to consider here is the fact that he crops this image. So here's the original, and this is just an example of how these photographers are really intentionally manipulating the negatives. That's probably the most important thing to keep in mind about pictorialism. So if you have any questions at all, as always, please do reach out. I'm happy to meet with you over Zoom or talk on the phone about your progress in the class and what you think about pictorialism.